Hey everyone, and welcome back to Binge Guide, the next show. I'm Andrew.
Hi everyone, I'm Victoria.
And you know, Victoria, I am always up for a good historical thriller.
Oh, me too.
Oh, I think I found one. Have you heard about this new film called The World Will Tremble?
I have heard about that. It sounds really intense. Prisoners escaping a Nazi extermination camp during World War II to expose what's happening to the world. That sounds
It's incredible.
really fascinating.
Yeah, and especially because it's based on a true story.
Oh, wow.
We've got a whole stack of articles, interviews, and even the film's trailer
It's a lot of material.
go over today.
Okay, cool.
So let's dive in. So the film is about this place called the Chełmno extermination camp in Poland.
Okay.
And it was in operation in two phases during the war. First, from December 1941 to April 1943, and then again from June 1944 to January 1945.
Okay. And it's important to differentiate these extermination camps from concentration camps.
Yeah.
Concentration camps were, undeniably brutal and often used as prisons and for forced labor.
Right.
But extermination camps like Chełmno were designed just for mass murder.
Right. It's chilling to think about.
Yeah.
The sources estimate that something like 152,000 to 200,000 people, primarily Jews and Soviet POWs, were systematically killed at Chełmno.
Gosh, it's just staggering when you think about those numbers, and it really drives home the scale of the atrocity.
For sure.
Out of an estimated 320,000 Jewish people sent to Chełmno, only 4 are documented as having survived.
Wow. And so this film focuses on 2 of those survivors, Solomon Wiener and Mikosz Pachlebnik.
Wow.
Can you imagine the courage it took to escape knowing that if you're discovered, you're dead?
Oh, absolutely.
But they didn't just run to save themselves, did they?
No. Their escape on January 19th, 1942 was fueled by a mission to tell the world what was happening at Chełmno. At that time, much of the world was still unaware of the systematic extermination.
So their eyewitness accounts became some of the first to reach the outside world, really shedding light on these unimaginable horrors being perpetrated by the Nazis.
Absolutely.
I wonder, did those accounts have an immediate impact, or was there disbelief at first?
That's something I'd like to explore further. It makes you wonder how they were able to convince people of the truth, especially when faced with, how could this really be happening?
Yeah.
It's a question that has relevance even today as we deal with issues like misinformation and denial.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It speaks to the broader theme of bearing witness.
Yeah.
And the challenges of making your voice heard, especially when you're speaking truth to power. And the filmmaker, Lior Geller, seems so committed to bringing this story to light.
Oh, absolutely. He spent over a decade researching this story, working with historians at Yad Vashem, that's Israel's Holocaust Remembrance Center.
Wow.
And even collaborated with the families of the escapees.
A decade of research is incredible. I wonder what drew him to this specific story.
Yeah.
What was he hoping to uncover or achieve?
That's fascinating. Was he looking for, specific details about the escape itself, or maybe trying to understand the psychological impact on these men who went through such unimaginable horrors?
Yeah, maybe a combination of both.
Yeah.
Perhaps he was drawn to the drama of the escape, but also wanted to capture that human story, the resilience of the spirit when faced with just unimaginable evil.
And that's kind of reflected in the film's longline. The film will focus on a moment of bravery, resilience, and hope, proving that one's will to live and tell others can overcome insurmountable odds and the most indescribable of human conditions.
It's a powerful statement that goes beyond just recounting these historical events.
Yeah.
It suggests a broader message about the strength of the human spirit.
Right, and I wonder how the film will portray these themes visually. Will they use, imagery or certain storytelling techniques to really evoke those feelings of resilience and hope amidst all the darkness?
Yeah, it makes you think about the choices a director makes to convey those emotions to the audience. Speaking of the director's vision, let's delve into the cast and crew who brought this story to life on screen.
So we were just talking about the director's vision for the film and how he might portray such a heavy and complex story. I think looking at the casting choices gives us some insight.
For sure. So to bring these characters to life, we have Oliver Jackson-Cohen. You might know him from The Invisible Man and The Haunting of Hill House. He's playing Solomon Wiener.
Oh yeah, he was great in those. He's really good at portraying characters who are going through a lot of psychological and emotional turmoil, which you think would be necessary for this type of role.
Yeah, absolutely. And then playing Mikosz Pachlebnik is Jeremy Newmark Jones. And what's interesting about this casting choice is that Jones's own grandparents were German Jews who fled Nazi persecution.
Wow, that's such a strong connection. Having that personal family history must bring so much depth to his understanding and portrayal of Mikosz. I wonder if he talked about that experience at all in any interviews.
I haven't seen anything specific to that yet, but it would be really interesting to hear his perspective and how that history influenced his approach to the role.
Yeah, it makes you think about how actors draw on their own experiences or do research to really embody these characters in a convincing way, especially in a story like this where the historical weight and the emotional intensity are so real.
Absolutely. And it's not just the two leads. Either the supporting cast is full of talent. We have Anton Lesser, who was in Andor and Game of Thrones.
Oh, cool.
He's in it, as well as David Cross, who is fantastic in The Reader.
Oh, I loved him in The Reader. He's such a good actor.
Yeah, and what about Michael Fox from Downton Abbey?
Oh, yeah. I can already picture him in this.
Yeah, and with a cast like this, The World Will Tremble. It's definitely shaping up to be a pretty powerful film.
It really is.
You know what I think is so interesting about this film is we often hear about the horrors of the Holocaust, but we don't often see stories that highlight the resilience and the resistance of those who lived through it.
Yeah, that's so true. It's important to remember that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can persevere. And by focusing on Solomon and Mikosz's escape and their determination to expose the truth, I think the film is shining a light on the human capacity for courage and hope.
Right. Speaking of exposing the truth, it's interesting to consider the impact that Solomon and Mikosz's eyewitness accounts had back in 1942.
Yeah.
Did their story lead to immediate outrage and action, or was it met with disbelief and resistance?
I was wondering about that too. I imagine it must have been difficult for them to convince people about how awful and brutal it really was.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when the world was already caught up in all the chaos of the war. It makes you wonder about the challenges they faced in sharing their story.
Yeah.
Did they run into skepticism or even denial from those who just didn't want to believe what was happening? Or were they met with apathy from those who were already overwhelmed with bad war news?
It's a reminder that even when there's evidence right in front of you, sometimes, as humans, we really struggle to process unimaginable things. And that struggle to comprehend and accept the truth is something that we see even today.
Definitely, especially in a world where there's so much misinformation and denial going on.
Yeah.
It makes you think, how can we ensure that these lessons from history aren't forgotten? And how can we combat these forces?
Absolutely. And I think maybe that is one of the main messages of The World Will Tremble. It's not just about remembering the past, but about understanding how important truth and accountability are in our lives today.
Yeah, this is making me want to see this film even more. Have you seen any early reviews or reactions to the film?
I have, actually. The film had its world premiere at the Miami Jewish Film Festival back in January.
Okay.
And the reviews have been really positive.
That's good to hear. What are people saying?
People are praising it for its emotion and how powerful the story is. They're also talking about its timely message about remembering and fighting hate. Many of the reviews have mentioned that the film does a good job capturing both the horrors of what happened and the strength of those who resisted.
I'm really curious how they found a balance between historical accuracy and, taking creative liberties in filmmaking.
Yeah.
It's a difficult line to walk, especially with a story as sensitive as this one.
From what I've read, they seem to have struck a good balance. The filmmakers consulted with historians and experts to make sure the film is accurate, but they also allowed for some creative expression.
It sounds like they've done a great job honoring the memory of the victims and survivors. And with a March 14th release, audiences won't have to wait too much longer to see it.
Speaking of the release date, the Wikipedia page for the film talks about the production companies involved. It lists Lorton Entertainment, UFO Films, Black Sheep Films, and Radiancy Pictures. Do you know any of these companies?
I've definitely heard of Black Sheep Films.
Yeah.
They've produced some really interesting films.
Yeah.
That really make you think, and they've tackled some important issues in their films. It seems like they focus on stories that shed light on important issues, and they want to get people thinking about the world around them.
That's a good sign. It makes me feel even more confident that this is going to be a film that really stays with you.
Yeah. Now, besides the production companies and all these positive reviews, is there anything else on the Wikipedia page that you found interesting?
Yeah, now besides the production companies and all these positive reviews, is there anything else on the Wikipedia page that you found interesting?
Well, one thing that did catch my eye was that they mentioned Dr. Naama Sheikh. She's a historian from Yad Vashem, and apparently she worked really closely with the director Lior Geller, throughout the whole process.
That's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
to have a historian from Yad Vashem on board for 10 years, That really says a lot about the filmmaker's commitment to making sure everything's accurate and feels real. Yeah, it really does. It makes you think about the kind of impact this film could have on people. By grounding it in real historical research and working with experts like Dr. Schick, they've made something that can teach people about what happened, but also be something that really connects with people on an emotional level.
Yeah, it's like they're building a bridge between what happened back then and what's happening now. It helps people connect with history in a more personal way.
Totally. And that's super important, especially when you're talking about something as significant and as tragic as the Holocaust. It's not just remembering dates and facts, but really understanding the stories of the people who went through it.
Absolutely. And speaking of stories, the Wikipedia page also lists a few other actors who are in the film that we haven't mentioned yet. Charlie McGachin, who was in Pennyworth, is in it, and so is Michael Epp from The Brutalist.
Oh, and Danny Scheinman, Tim Bergman, and George Lentz, too. Wow, they really put together a talented cast for this film. It seems like they were really careful about picking actors who can show a lot of emotion and really make their characters feel real.
Yeah, it's like they handpicked everyone to make sure each role, big or small, would feel really authentic and nuanced. All these details make me even more excited to see how it all comes together.
Me too. Don't forget this movie comes out in the U.S. on March 14th.
Yeah, that's just around the corner. I already got it on my calendar. You know, the world will tremble. It feels like more than just a historical film. It feels like a call to action, a reminder that it's important to remember the past and to fight against any kind of intolerance.
Totally. I mean, even the title of the film, it's such a strong statement. It suggests that what happened at Chełmno and at the other extermination camps, it's something that should shake us to our core and make us want to be better people, more informed and more compassionate.
Yeah, it's like a wake-up call. We can't just sit back and do nothing. We have to actively engage with history, learn from it, and use those lessons to build a better and more just future.
Yeah, and maybe this film can help get those conversations going. By showing this story, by showing the courage and resilience of those who resisted, the world will tremble, could inspire people to stand up against hate and injustice.
Well said. I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today, and if anyone's intrigued by what we talked about today, definitely add The World Will Tremble to your watch list. It's sure to be a powerful and moving film.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a film that deserves to be seen and talked about.
And that's it for this episode of Binge Guide, The Next Show. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those watch lists growing.